Today's scripture is from the book of Mark, chapter 14, verses 3 to 9 in the New Testament. It can be found on page 826 in the Pew Bible. Let us listen for the word. While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard, and she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was the ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her." Here ends the reading, and may God bless these words to our understanding.
As best as I know to describe it, I come from a long lineage of savers. Other less charitable people might call us hoarders, but regardless of the term, the sentiment remains the same. The women of my family know how to make things last. I remember when I was growing up, I'd sometimes go to work with my grandmothers on both sides of the family, and they'd pack themselves a lunch. And on most days, both of them would carefully pack a ham and cheese sandwich into a little square of aluminum foil. And when they were done with the sandwiches, they'd then carefully fold the aluminum foil into a little square and place it back into their purse. When they got home, they'd take out the aluminum foil, wash it in the sink, and then place it in a cabinet drawer to dry. For years, I thought they were just living by some unspoken grandmother's code that said, regardless of where you live, once your child has a child, you have to start saving aluminum foil. Only years later, as I grew older, did I realize that this tendency to save aluminum foil along with newspapers and glass bottles and all sorts of other tiny things was a byproduct of the fact that they had lived through the Great Depression, a time in which saving was synonymous with survival. But when the Depression era ended, their saving mindsets certainly did not. In fact, they passed it down to their children. And I grew up with a mother who brewed every pile of coffee grounds at least twice, did not taste good, and who still saves every plastic food storage container from when we get takeout. And from years of watching them, the women of my family have imbued this preservationist spirit in me. For example, when I was 17, I went on this once-in-a-lifetime trip with my mom to Italy. And on one of our last days, we visited the oldest apothecary in all of Rome. As we weaved through the narrow hallways of the store, one bottle of perfume amongst the hundreds caught my eye. It was a pure almond scent, which reminds me of being a kid and has been one of my favorite smells in my house growing up, but I had never seen it in a perfume before. So I knew I had to take it home with me. And then I brought it back to the States with me, and it felt like I had somehow trapped all of the memories from our trip inside this tiny glass bottle. And I wanted to preserve them forever. So I set the bottle in a cool, dry place, and I told myself that I'd only use it ultra sparingly, saving it for some big special occasion someday in the future. For 6 years, I looked at that perfume bottle on my dresser almost every day without ever using it, just waiting for the right occasion to strike. Then one day this past fall, when I was missing home and reminiscing on the memories my mom and I had shared during our travels, I decided to finally spray the perfume. And it had turned so bad. I was expecting a cloud of delicious almond scent, but after years of the bottle being untouched, all I got was this vague smell of rubbing alcohol. It was awful. I was crushed, but even at the time, as I was soaking in alcohol scent, I could tell myself it feels like there's an important lesson in this moment. In always waiting for just the right moment, I missed out on so many small moments of joy that I could have been having every day for 6 years, and I ended up with something that I couldn't use. In my attempts to preserve it, I had rendered the object completely useless. So on that day, I made a promise to myself to always spray the perfume, to burn the nice candles that cost me way more than what I make, to break out the good drinking glasses when I have company over, even if one of them might get broken in the celebration. I promised myself never to let preservation get in the way of celebration, especially when I don't know how much longer I'll have with these things, or more importantly, people, right in front of me at this particular moment in my life. And it's been much harder to actually use the things I buy than I expected. Sentimentality mixed with 3 generations worth of frugalness passed down to me has meant that I'm haunted by the question, what happens when it runs out? What happens when the thing I've made out to be a monument of my memories ceases to exist in the exact way it does now? Will my memories hold out when the physical objects I've used to symbolize them are long gone? If one bad spritz of perfume has led me to such an existential line of questioning, you can probably imagine how I reacted to the woman from today's scriptures who shattered an entire bottle of precious perfumed oil in one instance. From the text, we don't actually know too much about this woman, only that she comes to where Jesus is dining, donning an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she breaks open and pours atop Jesus' head. When the woman does this, the other dinner party guests react exactly how I fear and, on some level, know I would respond. They do so out of anger, saying to her and to one another, "Why would you do that? Don't you know what you just did? That one jar of perfume is worth about a year's wages, and you just wasted it all on a single fleeting moment. You could have waited, sold the perfume, and done something better and more generous with that money. Using it all at once at a dinner party feels like such a waste." I like to imagine that these people come from a long line of savers, too. That maybe, just maybe, they weren't just thinking about the money, but all the memories stored in the jar as it sat in the woman's home, day in and day out, collecting memories along with her. And they knew all that went into saving up for it in the first place. Yes, I want to be charitable to them, but I know I don't want to be remembered like them. Much like the women, these dinner party guests are only described by and remembered for their actions. And when directly at the table with Jesus, they're more concerned about the behavior of the woman next to them than their connection with Christ, who's right in front of them. They're remembered for their worry. But the woman, who faced only rebuke from her peers, is remembered still today for her generosity. Now, Jesus sees what's happening in this moment, how the woman's generosity has been met with disdain, and so he seeks to set the record straight in asking, "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. She has done what she could. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached around the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." I'm so struck by those 2 phrases in the middle there. She has done a beautiful thing to me. She has done what she could. Because I think they can teach us a lot about what it means to welcome and honor those we encounter. Just from that first sentence alone, she has done a beautiful thing to me, we come to understand that Jesus cares about beauty. Not beauty necessarily in the strictly aesthetic sense, but the type of beauty that comes from sharing what you cherish most with another person you encounter. From this alone, we know that Jesus is seeking to create beautiful moments and be within spaces of value. But nothing sticks with me from the story quite like the phrase, "She has done what she could." As a woman at the time, she probably had no formal seat of power conferred on her from which she could make decisions. She likely couldn't even enter important conversations about the Jesus way as we donned it. Therefore, she only does what she can. She begins where she is. She asks, "What do I have? What can I do? What risk am I willing to take? How can I make Jesus feel welcome today?" There's no way I know how to answer those questions for her. Sometimes I wonder if she came from a wealthy family that had access to things that would make such an act of generosity easier. Or maybe she saved for the alabaster jar for years on end. All we do know is that she began where she was. Perhaps if she had been a 21st century middle-class North American like I am, the seductions of all would beckon her to rush out and buy something else, hire someone to cater the event, enlist the whole community to do something spectacular and well-organized. But her one act was spectacular enough. Doing what she could puts her in amazing company. It puts her in the company of the little shepherd boy who first played the drum for Jesus to welcome him into life on earth. It puts her in the company of those we remember on this Palm Sunday with the children's reading, who took their coats off their back and made a makeshift red carpet of sorts for Jesus' triumphal entry. And this train of bearers of the beautiful stretches out into our own stories all the time. We see it in the ones who gather flowers from the garden to bring color to the drabness, in the ones who offer clean sheets and a well-lighted place to travelers who are weary, in the ones who sing lullabies to tiny babies for their comfort and rest. It looks different for every person and in every circumstance, but I think we all know what welcome feels like. It feels like being chosen, being brought into the fold and acknowledged for who we are. In today's story, Jesus could easily identify what welcome felt like. It was the sound of glass shattering, ruptured through the air, and the fragrant aromas entering the room as his head became submerged with precious oil. Welcome, in this instance, felt like one woman doing what she could and offering what she could. It was the very
Once
best
you
of
stop
what
doing
she
what you're
had,
doing,
and God
your
tells
mom
us
is
that's
here,
what
then you are the like her enemy.
As we enter into this Holy Week, we're
And she
confronted
did it.
with many of the big events of the faith. Most years on Palm Sunday, we read the Passion narrative of Jesus' last day and hours, leading up to his crucifixion and death. Or we do so as we did this morning in reading his triumphal entry into Jerusalem as our kids brought palm fronds to the front of the service. We'll gather later this week on Maundy Thursday to hear about Jesus' Last Supper and his Great Commandment. And we'll gather on Good Friday to hear about his last steps, last words, and last breath, even on the cross. But the grand story of Holy Week starts earlier. It starts here, in someone's home, over dinner, and I don't want us to miss that. Jesus goes into the excruciating events of the week to come, first knowing what welcome has felt like. So what can you do? What's the proverbial alabaster jar of perfume in your life? How can you craft a welcome for the weary that's so extravagant, those around you question what you're doing and your sanity? For the savers amongst us, those who relish in preservation, what might it mean to let go of the things we've held most tightly in an outward expression of love to one another? I don't know what it will be for you, but deep down, I think we all know what welcome feels like. So this week, may we try to live up to the memory of the woman with the alabaster jar. May we do what we can with what we have in this present moment. And may we find beauty in welcoming others into the fold. So go forward, break the jar, light the expensive candle, spray the perfume. Do whatever you can to make the present moment beautiful and the people around you feel welcome. This Holy Week, go forth and be extravagant in the way that you extend your love. The message of God for the people of God. Amen.